They called him the chosen one. He carried the weight of every expectation on his shoulders. But he never broke. We were all witnesses. Every rival was defeated. Every idol was destroyed. He took the crown and kept it. Behold the greatness. He is the forever king.
Move this man!
Ever since 2016, immediately after delivering the most unforgettable quote of his career, "I'm chasing the ghost in Chicago," his objective became crystal clear. LeBron was no longer focused solely on winning basketball games. He was pursuing something bigger, the validation of being considered the greatest. At that stage, that pursuit didn't seem unrealistic at all. Following the events of 2016, it looked like he was genuinely closing the distance, defeating a 73-win team, capturing the Finals MVP, and completing one of the greatest comebacks in NBA history created the feeling that history was shifting in his favor. But from that point onward, the results never quite lived up to the legendary narrative surrounding them.
He carried the weight of every expectation on his shoulders. But he never broke.
So the real question became this: was the goal still to win championships, or had it shifted toward controlling how history would ultimately remember him? Was the pursuit centered on adding more titles, or on securing the legacy he wanted attached to his name?
We broke LeBron.
In Game 5.
So get your ass out of here with that, all right? You understand how you got the Cleveland, how you got the Miami bill? You remember
That's
that?
true. You broke them in 2010.
Okay, so remember that, all right?
The Boston Celtics were the huge upset. They advanced to the conference final.
Since 2016, the resume hasn't grown in the way many expected it would. The list includes one championship inside the bubble, no additional regular season MVP awards, a finals record that became even less favorable, seasons that ended without making the playoffs, first-round eliminations, multiple sweeps, and no more all-defensive team selections. If the objective was to genuinely challenge Michael Jordan in the categories that define basketball greatness, the last several years haven't. Strengthen that case. Rather than closing the distance, the comparison has only become more difficult. And when the achievements themselves are no longer enough to carry the conversation, something else often emerges to shape the narrative.
But the fact that he was the best player and everybody was depending on him to show up and do what he does, and he was MIA.
He had a bad game.
No, he had a bad series.
These are the facts of the case, and they are undisputed.
That's when the spotlight shifts to the media narrative. If matching Jordan's resume becomes too difficult, the focus turns to influencing how people perceive the comparison. The conversation gets flooded with the same talking points. The message is echoed over and over until it starts to sound like accepted fact rather than something to question. Instead of encouraging discussion, the goal becomes establishing the narrative as unquestionable, and that's the pattern many people believe has unfolded. Not only through Nike, and not only through television analysts, but through an entire media ecosystem that consistently reinforces and amplifies LeBron's legacy.
We were all witnesses. Every rival was defeated. Every idol was destroyed.
You sit on a throne of lies.
The challenge is that the facts continue to interrupt the narrative. Because when you take a closer look at LeBron's career, particularly the chapters that often receive the least attention, the flaws become much harder to overlook. The claim that he was always unshakable doesn't hold up when you examine the historical record. Well before 2016, before the championships, the superstar rosters, and the carefully crafted image, there were defining moments that painted a very different picture.
Brings it up the floor, gets away, sets. Nice fake, gets a good open look, and misses the three. Rebounding Iguodala, foul from behind with 10.6 remaining, and that will do.
You get nothing!
Look back at the 2010 series against Boston. There's very little confusion about what happened there. History has remembered it exactly as it unfolded. LeBron and Cleveland held a 2-1 advantage. Everything was in position for a deep playoff run. The Cavaliers were playing on their home stage with expectations at their highest. But over the final 3 games, everything unraveled. His production wasn't simply below expectations. It raised serious concerns. The shooting efficiency dipped. The turnovers piled up, his body language drew criticism, and his overall impact faded throughout the series. It wasn't viewed as an ordinary playoff defeat. For many, it was a moment where the pressure appeared to reveal an uncomfortable reality, and rather than regrouping, rebuilding, and making another run with Cleveland, LeBron ultimately decided to move on.
It's funny, I don't know. I don't know why it's discussed so much in our sport and why it's the A-all, B-all of everything.
LeBron's messaging often takes a different approach. Instead of focusing on failure and growth, it tends to reframe setbacks. Rather than staying in Cleveland after the 2010 collapse against Boston, he left for Miami. South Beach wasn't viewed by many as just a basketball decision. It was seen as a move to strengthen his legacy by joining two other elite stars. That choice permanently shaped how his career would be judged. Then came the 2011 finals. With an experienced roster and championship expectations, Miami entered as the favorite. But when the pressure peaked, LeBron struggled throughout the series. It wasn't remembered as one poor game, but as a disappointing finals performance that continues to be part of his legacy. Many critics argue that later narratives attempted to minimize those moments. Campaigns suggesting every rival was conquered don't fully align with history. Against several of the era's biggest stars, Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, Tim Duncan, and others, the results reflected fierce competition rather than clear dominance. Winning some battles while losing others is very different from owning an entire era. The contrast many people draw with Michael Jordan centers on accountability. Jordan openly acknowledged failures and allowed his response on the court to define him. His legacy grew from how he answered adversity, not from controlling the conversation around it. LeBron's career remains one of the greatest in NBA history. But for many fans, being an all-time great and being the undisputed greatest are two different standards. They argue that the GOAT conversation is built not only on statistics and longevity, but also on consistency, accountability, and how a player responds under the brightest spotlight. Ultimately, supporters of Jordan believe the biggest difference isn't talent or basketball ability, it's mindset. Jordan answered criticism with results, while LeBron has often responded by shaping the narrative around his career. Whether that perception is fair or not remains part of what keeps the GOAT debate alive. Even some of LeBron's biggest milestones, breaking the scoring record, winning championships, and sharing the court with his son, are often presented as chapters in a larger legacy narrative. For critics, every achievement seems tied to the GOAT conversation rather than simply being celebrated on its own. The more the legacy is managed, the more it appears to reflect a desire for history's approval. Another major point in the debate is adaptability. LeBron's versatility has been one of his greatest strengths, allowing him to score, facilitate, defend, and lead in different ways. But some argue that same flexibility has also allowed responsibility to shift depending on the situation. Jordan, by contrast, carried the spotlight without an escape route. When his team lost, the blame rested on him. When they won, the credit did too. That clear ownership is one reason. Many believe his legacy remains unmatched. Longevity is another pillar of LeBron's case. Playing at an elite level for over 2 decades is an extraordinary accomplishment. Still, critics argue that lasting longer isn't the same as reaching a higher peak. Accumulating records and statistics doesn't automatically outweigh an era of complete dominance. Supporters of Jordan point to the impact he had on the league. They argue his presence made championships feel out of reach for everyone else, while LeBron's era remained far more open and competitive. Instead of creating inevitability, it created opportunity. That's why many believe the GOAT debate continues. Not because Jordan's resume lacks strength, but because LeBron's legacy is constantly compared rather than universally accepted. Ironically, many believe LeBron's career would be appreciated even more if it were judged on its own merits instead of through the GOAT lens. His versatility, longevity, basketball IQ, and sustained excellence already place him among the greatest players ever. But critics argue that the constant pursuit of the #1 spot has kept the debate alive. In the end, history usually settles these conversations over time. As emotions fade and careers are viewed from a distance, the focus shifts from narratives to accomplishments. For many, the greatest legacy belongs not to the player who argued for the crown, but to the one who never had to ask for it.